Everything says we're live. So welcome to Heller Barnes and year 2025. And it's exciting because we have Keith Brown with us today. And so it works out really, really well. I know, Mr. Heller, how's your Christmas? How's your New Year? And then we'll pretend Keith's just not even here. You have a fantastic time?
I had a great time. We go to, our cousins out in the Joanna's cousins and, out in the, Long Island area and have a great Christmas. New Year's, we're experienced, so we don't go anywhere. We have an early dinner and
Yeah.
and we avoid what I can't stand is all those I don't mind the countdown, but it's all the crap leading up to it.
Right. Right.
Even though they have stars singing, if I see Ryan Seacrest one more time, I'm gonna kill myself.
Yeah.
I'm
It's,
just
yeah.
just
We were about
talk
done with
about
it
it.
by 11 o'clock. We did stay up, but yeah. All right.
What time do you go to bed normally?
Oh, normally now because I tend to get up really early. I'm an early bird these days. Remember, I was a musician younger, so I used to go to bed at 2 or 3 in
Ah,
the morning for a
mhm.
couple decades as a young guy. But now I'm up every day by 6 a.m., 7 days a week as a rule. So there. And hey, by the way, do we have a guest today, Johnny?
Yes, we have the wonderful, talented Mr. Keith Brown, ladies and gentlemen. Um,
Hey, guys.
here's it. We've known each other not a long time. We know each other from New
No,
England retreat, and
just a couple years.
you have, you are. I think you're known industry wise. I don't know if you know this, but everybody likes you.
No.
I've met you, and I can't
Mm.
figure it out, but everybody seems to like you. And, you're really seriously, you're just a sweet you're super talented. We'll talk about that. And you're just a nice, wonderful guy, and everybody's happy to know you.
Mm. You guys are so kind, and I greatly appreciate that. It means a
Don
lot
didn't
coming
say
from you
that.
guys. Oh, yeah, that's right, that's right.
No,
That's
Yeah, I
right.
wouldn't. No.
no.
So Don, no, praise me, will you please? No, I'm kidding.
Are you
You're very
making fun of
sweet,
my
and thank you.
listen, I wanna there's some comments, my hair, I'm like, yeah, yeah, those,
Chia pet.
troll yeah, I'm like a chia pet. It doesn't get long, it just gets bigger and bigger, and I didn't have time to get a haircut this morning. As soon as we're done, I'll go get it all chopped off. It does get, I'm like Dr. J in the
Oh my
ABA years.
oh my
Yep.
god, I need a haircut, I tell you that much, so
Well,
at least the helmet can just or the headphones can just helmet it down for me so I can,
Do to my
pretend
I
it's
love it. There we go.
I went off to my son's house for 2 weeks working on his studio. Is that when I helped build
Woohoo.
his studio a year and a half ago? I didn't shave the whole 2 weeks. I come home, I have a full my but Lisa didn't even notice the first hour and a half, 2 hours I was home. I'm in the car. I'm thinking, I wonder if she even know. Anyway, whatever.
Oh my
So
god.
Keith, you and I we met. I know exactly where you and I met, and Johnny, maybe you can tell yours. But we were at the Neener event, the New England Narrators Retreat.
Neener.
And that was, I'm gonna say 3 years ago?
Think
2 or 3 years
2 or 3,
ago.
I think it might have been 2. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. 23 was my first
Oh,
one.
okay. Well, whenever you were there,
Yeah.
so we met at
Yeah.
that, and, you have a background that parallels my wife's in that you are, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did opera,
I
you're a
did.
singer,
Mhm.
and,
Hi, Lisa. I love Lisa. She's the best.
that means you're still a singer. Oh, Lisa says not true. Yeah, anyway. Um, Not true. She was talking about me being nice. So the question is, tell us your backstory. Like you were a performer long before you became a performer for narrators, for narration and things. What was your performance background and how did it serve you?
Yeah, well, like you say, I've been performing almost my whole life. I would say I was a musician first. As a kid, I played, not many people have this as their first serious instrument, but I was you know how, people in elementary school in the US, a lot of us, we learned to play those little plastic recorders? You
Yeah,
learn to
yeah,
play the
yeah.
recorder in, like, 3rd or 4th grade or whatever?
We have them
Well, I
around.
well, I had already been playing the instrument by that point. This is a very weird flex. I had been playing that for, by that point, probably 5 years. I played recorders, and early music. They call it early music, in the kind of the musicology world. My teacher, played the viola da gamba professionally. That was her main instrument, which is
Wait,
a
what? What was it
it's
called?
called it's a sort of it's not exactly a direct antecedent, but it's sort of like a very old version of the cello, or they're like, uh yeah, so, like, they were played usually, like, in the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries. Anyway, she played that. She had a harpsichord in her house. And so she was so cool, and I played, so I played, like, recorders and Bach and all this stuff for years. I still joke with my wife sometimes, it's how I used to get all the ladies was, because I played recorder.
Yeah.
Um, but then I, uh, became a trumpeter, and I played in every band I could, I mean, just every band I could, and, until my senior year of high school, I was sure that I was gonna be a professional trumpet player. That was what I and that's actually what I went to conservatory, to study was trumpet performance, in Cincinnati for about a year. But the thing is, my senior year of high school, I discovered theater, and I it was the very first year you could license the, Les Mis, the student version of Les Mis,
Oh,
and so
Colette.
I had sung in boys choir too, the Dayton Boys Choir for years at in a choir, but then I'd never really been a soloist, and I just said, "You know what? Screw it. I really wanna do this. I think it'd be so fun." I had no idea. I knew that my singing voice was somewhat lower, and so I was like, "Well, I probably shouldn't audition for Jean Valjean," but of course, that is the part that I got. I got Jean Valjean. So, I had a Broadway mi I grew a beard for that show. It's the only show I have ever grown a full beard for, and I had and it was awful. I should have had them it would have been so much easier on me if I had just let them glue a beard on me. But so because I had to spirit gum my mic, my Broadway mic into my onto my flippin' face,
oh.
and it was rough, but it allowed me to use my falsetto and cheat through a part that was, way, way, way too high for me. And, but that changed my life. At that point, I was like, "What am I gonna do?" I thought I was gonna play trumpet, but now I can't, theater people are my people. What am I gonna do? So I ended up, changing majors. I re-auditioned at the same conservatory, and became a vocal performance major. That's what they call, like, classical voice if you major in that at school. And, then I sang opera, I got my master's degree in that, and then I ended up, singing opera. I was focused on that professionally for almost 10 years. And then yeah, but, here's the thing. It may not surprise you to know that it's really hard to make a living, as an opera singer. It's actually almost impossible. Um, and so I had to develop a lot of other skills in the meantime, and then when and, it was one of those things I we'll talk about this more. I'm grateful for all the lessons that it gave me, because I apply just countless lessons that I learned from that world, being on stage, professional things, business tactics, all kinds of stuff I
Yeah.
absorbed from it. But it was hard, and after having lived on the road for a while, it was hard to kinda make ends meet, and then, of course, if you wanna have a family, it's very possible to do, but takes a serious commitment from you and your partner and your family, and I was just like, "This isn't really working for me anymore. This doesn't work for us," my wife is a singer too, and she teaches voice, year-round up here in, Interlochen, Michigan at the, I live on the campus here of a international boarding school for the arts called Interlochen Center for the Arts. It's been around for just shy of a century, and it's really cool. It's an awesome place to live. Um, but anyway, wow, I'm getting off topic there. But anyway, but yeah, I kind of got acquainted with voiceover back in, college in my master's degree because I already knew chances are it's gonna take a long time to build your career, and, especially in opera, they consider depending on the type of voice you are, you're still considered a developing voice until you're in your 30s. Um, and then you still have many decades potentially so you're a baby even when you're 30, in opera. So I was like, "This is a long game." I had been very interested in, finding other ways to use my voice, honestly, things that would engage me. I say yes to everything. I'm like, "I wanna do this and that and the other." And, so I got acquainted with VO because, there was a wonderful instructor named, who is no longer with us, but the wonderful, man named Rocco Dalvera, who was a multifaceted artist, dancer, drama director at the Cincinnati Conservatory. He also taught voiceover classes there and gave me, he was so unbelievably generous. He basically gave me a crash course in everything about, voiceover genres and styles and what do you need. He he hooked me up with a studio, and I got my first commercial demo made. Uh,
How long
perish the
ago was
thought of
that?
listening to that again. That 2009, and then very briefly, I did a couple of, like, local jobs in Cincinnati. My first VO jobs were in studio. I did a I did a video game that no one has played, that is because it was a video game for corporate sensitivity training, and I played a character in it, and
Oh,
it was, like, some of the most fun I'd ever had. That half an hour I spent in the studio with those folks, I was like, "Oh my god, I need to keep doing this," but it didn't really circle back into my life until probably about 2016, and that was when opera was slowing down. Agents and me, we were always just kinda ships in the night in opera world. I just never really found the right team, and so, yeah, and I had all this time, and I remember going on one of my last, gigs, and it was a small role in opera where they're called, comprimari, or, small comprimarios are like small. Oh, you know Paul Bellantoni, right? Yeah,
sure.
Paul sang opera even longer than me, and he was based in Europe for a while too. But, yeah, he knows about these small roles that can be breakout roles, but anyway, I was singing, the doctor in La Traviata, which is a role I sang a bunch of times. It's a good part, you don't have much to do, so I used all of my free time, you know I went to this thing called a gym back then, it's really interesting, uh, and I would occasionally go exercise, and then I was self-educating. I went on ACX, and I reconnected with my old coach, with Rocco, and other folks, and just started, basically self-teaching, and yeah, and then I started working in audiobooks, professionally in 2017, and, yeah,
Well, I
and
have a
then,
question.
yeah.
I have a question on your ACX thing. If I go and query your name on Audible, Keith Brown, I think 25, 30 books come up, something like that. Is that, but I suspect you've done a couple extras beyond that. Is that even close?
I have, and I'm glad you bring it up because, yeah, if you do find me, I mean, I've been doing this since about 2017, like I said. That was, I think, when I did my first book in fall of that year. But also for a bunch of years, I was also juggling work as, well, I've taught, and I was a public radio host, a classical music on-air host for, Interlochen Public Radio, which uh, predates NPR, actually. It's, one of the original NPR stations. And so I was doing that, and was the producer of a syndicated show about video game music. So I was doing a lot of stuff, and I had very little. My bandwidth for audiobooks was like, it was just a trickle for probably the first 4 or 5 years, really, that I did audiobooks, and it wasn't until I did my first in-person event, actually, at Neener, in 2023, was the first time I actually met other human beings in real life that did this, and it really changed my life,
Yeah.
actually. Uh, but anyway, yeah, so,
Well,
yes.
I'm glad it changed your life, hopefully for the better. I always laugh when people go "neener" because until I think last year, I don't think I mean, we knew it was N-E-N-R, but no one ever said I never heard anyone say "neener." But it was like all
Yeah.
of a sudden it's what it is, and now it's like it's what it's always been, even
Mhm, mhm. Yeah,
so what brought you to, the New England Narrator Retreat?
well,
I know, but don't say the bus and the plane and crap, I mean
yeah, right. Um, so a lot of things, actually. When I got into actually, I had been doing audiobooks for a bit, and I had received a little bit of coaching, but not a lot of specialized coaching. But I decided I wanted to get more serious about it and up my game, and I, reached out to the wonderful Carol Monda,
Ah.
and got in touch with her, and we just vibe really well together. She's just a wonderful coach, and many of us know her well, and I just love her to death. Um, she was, really instrumental in just kind of helping me, get new demos made, kind of polish things up, really get that specific work of taking. I mean, in my case, I was used to, for 15 years, projecting my voice without amplification over an orchestra on a stage, so I'm used to using my voice on that scale. So I really, it's
It's
a
the
journey
same,
to
right?
learn. Right, it's just the same,
Is that
exactly. Yeah, and, yeah, I've broken so many mics. No, uh, So, yeah, really recalibrating my voice and trying to, and I always have to work on it, the intimacy of the booth. And
Yeah.
I'm a very, like, golden retriever person. I'm very exuberant, and so it's like, "Whoa, buddy, take it back down." Uh, so anyway, yeah, I worked with Carol, and, uh, gosh, I think she recommended the retreat, a few times. And honestly, I had a few years where it was hard. I actually kinda burned out a little bit on, not audiobooks, but on, just the radio work I was doing was extremely labor intensive, and
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, it was one of the coolest things I've ever gotten to do, but, being the executive producer and the creator and the programmer and the mix I did all the mixing and everything, and I wrote the show. It was so much work, and I really kinda I was just kinda overwhelmed with all the things I had said yes to. I was just trying to juggle too many balls, honestly, and, I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, I don't know, I'm getting some signs from the universe that I maybe need to, like, take this work a little more seriously, and I wonder, I was like, "Can I work with publishers if I'm not, like, full time available all the time, like, how do I make a transition?" And she said, "Oh, you can absolutely do that." And suddenly, I don't know, some kinda light went on, in my head, and I was like, I guess I'd been kinda counting myself out, you know, and
Yeah.
saying, you're not committed enough if you're not doing it 1,000,000 hours a week, right? All or
Oh,
nothing. Right. So I finally realized, I was like, "You know what? That can't be the case, though, because there are so many actors that they do voiceover in a bunch of little buckets of work in their careers, and they make it fit them however it serves them." And I was like, "So,
yeah.
yeah."
You bring up an interesting part of this gig we're doing. I mean, we're all a clearly creative artists. That's why we're drawn to this. But
Mm,
if it becomes a burdensome bit of work,
mm,
just a slog, something is wrong because we don't we all said no to punching into a clock and being in a cubicle and
mhm,
I mean, we traded in a cubicle with other people nearby to a cubicle with no one nearby at all. But it's still the creative arts have got to be you have to make this it's an important point. You have to make it rewarding.
mm,
And if you
mhm.
find yourself in the spot that keepers in that you're in, that it's just gosh, just too much, then I guess now you found a happier mix of things to keep you occupied, to keep you working, and it's become fun again, yes?
Very much so. Very much so. I think it is, I mean, I think right, I mean, we love to play, and I think that, we're sort of suspicious of play or of having a good time, maybe just the way society, kind of, teaches us, when we're growing up. It's very capitalist of us to say, "You gotta work, and work is serious, and it can't be fun." But I really see, at least in my view, if I see the work of a great performer, they're having a good time, and that's
Right.
I think it's I mean, it's deeply essential, right? And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think you have to find a way, you have to find joy, because I think you could sense it if an artist, well, you can sense it if an artist is full of joy when they're doing their craft.
Yeah.
And that's not to say it's all, I mean, it's never going to be every day sunshine and roses. There's days when you still are like, wow, I thought I knew this accent, or I thought I had these, characters worked out, but I just, like, wires are crossed today. So you have days where we're different people every day, but at
Yeah.
the same time, I think we have to keep, yeah, it took me years
Yeah.
to really cultivate a way to get back to that, remember to be in that lightness and a
Yes.
joy.
There has to be that period of like, "Hey, geez, I'm doing some creative stuff. This is great." And you have to in our business, both in I mean, the opera when you do an opera, when you do a role in a show, you generally know what the show is and you wanna do it and you have a real that you really work to get in it. A
Mhm,
lot of times in the audiobook world or in the commercial world or in e-learning, all those other voiceover things, sometimes the scripts aren't everything that you had hoped,
mhm,
and yet you still need to find a way as an
mhm,
actor to communicate the author's truth without editorializing. At
sure,
least an advantage in theater, in opera, and all that things is a part of the character can be to editorialize. You can might be able to write then find a way to make it part of the character. In these other things,
sure.
man, if it's not on the page, it's not there. And some people shouldn't be allowed to put words together and call it a book and ask it to be done. And yet they do it all the time, and our job is to make our opinion of that we seem bright. You know,
Yeah.
I'm sure we've all done work in our time that said, "Oh my god, what am I doing?"
Oh,
But
yeah.
you have to buffalo through and make it happen because we're committed to a larger idea, which is the creative arts,
Mhm, mhm.
acting, and that I think and I know that when we worked at Neener, I was very impressed with you, and I remain so.
You're very
Um,
sweet, and
yeah,
let me tell you, I also and a point I thought to make earlier, and this ties in right now, is that I think I've reached a place where, I really accept that I have to figure out how I do the work. We all have to figure out what do we need to do to feel prepared, to feel happy, to find the joy, and I would say, especially in my early years of this, I have a personality that can really obsess over extremely tiny details, extreme kind of perfectionism. And I learned slowly that you have to train yourself to let go of that way of thinking. And I also think something about the way you work on stage, you spend months, years honing your craft, your instrument, your body, to project, to be able to do that and not harm your voice because it's a muscle, muscular system. So you learn all of these things and you spend all this time obsessing over every single tiny fragment of every word. Like, I mean, every opera role I do, in case you don't know and are watching or are listening, you know, in an opera, you're very frequently not performing in your native language. And if the show is in archaic Italian, you need to know every single word that's being said in the whole show in archaic Italian. So that means usually the work of learning a role is that you translate, or in a lot of cases, there are resources you can use to find a word for word translation, but you have to know it like a play. But it's like someone said, Johnny, so you're going to be in whatever we're doing, Fiddler on the Roof, but it's in German. The whole show is in German, or whatever, and you have to be able to take that extra step, and it's a tremendous amount of work. And but anyway, but it also leads you to be uh, the way we work with vocal coaches and stuff, we can become very precious about, it's like, "Oh, I have this poetry by Schubert, and I have to just know it. It has to be part of my bones, and I have to work on it for 20 years." And I actually think that the audiobook work and voiceover work have been very healthy for me in a lot of ways because they forced me to let go of a lot of that perfectionism. And I now find that I think it's a necessity of the work that we have to be spontaneous because we got 18 hours to get done, not, and we have no time to rehearse. So it's a necessity, but it's also something I think is really beautiful, that you have to be completely intuitive, instinctive, honest, and open. And I
yeah,
think that's
yeah.
been really good for me. Yeah.
And that's a great point because a lot of people, when they look at audiobook performances and audiobook acting in general, they sometimes because the word's on the page and it goes right from the page from my mouth out to the mic and then it carries out. But there's tons of room for creativity and interpretation and moment to moment work just like in a show, a play. And that's where the creative joy comes from. The thing I miss the most, and I'm because you're a stage actor and opera performer, it must be and I miss the immediacy of the audience response.
Right.
You know,
Sure.
like
Absolutely.
when you tell a story to your 75 children, whatever you have there, and, you can see their response. Like, when you go into I don't know if you've ever done library reads, but when you get, let's say, kids, and you say, "Alright, story time, once upon a time." As soon as you say that, those kids, boom, they're glommed onto you,
Oh,
and
yeah.
their attention is completely on and the trick is with children, we have to hold that attention by making the story continually interesting and
Mhm.
engaging.
Mhm.
And I find that in our work, and I don't know if you feel the same, particularly coming from stage, is that you don't have
There's no
in stage,
applause.
you can see them looking
Yeah.
at you. In stand-up comedy, I hear the laughs. In
Yeah.
this thing, I'm like, "Hello, is this mic on?" So you don't get anything. But
N
but is
Oh,
was that
yeah.
a hard switch for you?
Yes, it really was, and actually, it was so hard that, I really struggled for a little while when I was just starting, not with performing well. Ultimately, I think I don't enjoy listening to my stuff from the beginning, but I still went about it with my head in the right place, and
Yeah.
I had done my prep. I had worked on the characters. It's more that I wish I had been easier on myself about it and not done, so many retakes, all these other things. Yeah, but I think that was a tricky adjustment, and I didn't even realize how much how difficult it had become
Mm.
because for some reason, you know how you absorb lessons sometimes decades after they came to you, and you even understood them then, but then suddenly it's like you're 25 years later, you're like, "Oh,
Oh,
Jesus, that's
That's
what
what he
they were
was saying.
talking about."
That's what she was
And
saying. Yeah.
so somehow, even though I knew from stage work and stuff that it's about people. You draw energy from people. You're giving it, I mean, you're doing it for people, and it's about knowing people and being able to work a room at a donor event, which I did a great deal of in my time. I was kind of a go-to with several of the companies when I was, apprenticing with opera companies. I was like the guy I would always be the one who got sent to like a, I don't know, Secretary of State meeting or something like that to sing the national anthem and then, work the donors or at a
yeah.
party because I love that kind of work. I love talking to people and getting to know them, and, which of course has served me really well so far, in the world of audiobooks and voiceover because it's about people. But for some reason, starting out in voiceover, I was like, I'm in this little booth and I need to be perfect before I reach out and meet anyone. I kinda had it all bass-ackwards, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
and I really I think that what really transformed things was, honestly, it was going to the New England retreat and starting to go to physical events and make friends that do what
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do, and I feel like that is what I was missing, and I wish I had discovered it sooner, but that's when it came to me, and I suddenly realized it's yes, you need people. And of course I'm gonna be in this booth for a million hours talking to nothing and making myself laugh or whatever.
Well,
But the community events, the meeting others, the bouncing ideas, bitching about things, whatever, like that community element it is deeply it's just so crucial. And I'm glad I've
yeah,
discovered it now.
All right. Would it be
yeah,
safe to say it totally changed your perspective?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I suddenly realized I felt like, I guess it's hard for me not to talk in cliches about it, but yeah, I realized that I belonged here. I belong in this. I do have skills that are of use, of value to this community. I can do it. Everybody else is on the journey with me as well.
And
Nobody's perfect, and
the
that's what's beautiful.
Well,
yeah.
wait, somebody like you with such an extensive music background, I mean, I totally relate to that. What
Mm,
happens when you're with all these world-class performers, Johnny's done the same thing, you start thinking, I've got 25 years before I'll be at that level of maybe it's 10 years, 5 years, but it's a very extended period of time before a new student becomes where their teacher is at. It's multiple years, and it's very clear as a young musician that, wow, I can't do anything compared to her. I can't do anything compared to them. You quickly learn, man, in this business, I'll bet one of the things is I've seen people that had something in their background that gave them skills and they had the right feel right up front and they had to add on the discipline that you already have as a musician, but they
mm,
understood feel right up front and they were able to nail in a specific area the feel but not have all the other skills. And so they were approaching it backwards from where a performer starts, which
mhm,
you already understood. But boy, is it hard to let go of that early training where you're doing
mhm.
50
Well,
hours in the practice room to do one little 2 minute segment. And
Yes,
that's
yeah.
just the norm as a musician to spend 50 to 100 hours on something that ultimately turns out to be 2 minutes worth of actual performance. You do that in the booth, that's really cost effective, if you spend 50
Sure.
hours rehearsing
Yeah,
the
good luck with
2 minute
that.
segment, so you have to learn to be spontaneous now. I think Johnny's background with, being in an audience and getting immediate feedback and finding out, oh, I said that backwards or wrong," and they
yeah, oh,
still
yeah,
laughed,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
you realize that it didn't require yes, you want it to be right, but sometimes the thing that's just slightly, quote, different gives you a feel, and you realize, oh, I can grab that feel in
Yeah.
20 different ways.
You
Yeah.
guys have all said something super inter when Keith mentioned that, that later on in his work, earlier lessons come back and say, "Oh, that's what they meant."
Mm.
And that's a real common thing. A lot of the things that Don will teach me about, tech stuff that I say, like, Joanna and I had to do a book, and it was really tough, and she was not feeling it, and I had to plug in all it was just and he showed me a way to do it. And so I, Joe Tech here, had to do this thing throughout the book. I color coded and moved things around, and I did it for this. It's like a 17-hour book, and I can't remember it now. But he spent forever and he did it. Then it'll come back again, and sometimes he says, "This one." I don't know if you've worked with Don in a tech way at all, but he's really intuitive and really good at understanding what the person he's dealing with needs.
Mhm.
And I think for any kind of coach, any kind of teacher, you need to understand what your, for lack of a better word, student needs, how they need to hear it, and what they need to take. And sometimes what you've heard from your past coaches, teachers, or even people you didn't even like said, "Oh, that's what they meant." And even to this day, I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh shit, I can't believe I didn't understand 25 years ago when they told me that.
Right.
This is what they needed." And
Yeah.
and and the other thing is there are times, and there will always be times because the creative arts community, you guys have we all have talent. There's talent. And so even I would not say accidentally, but blessedly, there will be many, many times when you will absolutely hit it and knock it out of the park, and you may not always know how or why. You just
Mhm.
know you were really on. And it happens in music, it happens in theater, it happens in audiobooks. And I think what we strive to do is to understand why, to break it down and consistently hit it out of the park. And I think that's
Right.
what we need to strive for. What
Mhm.
that's
Mm.
it's all about.
The consistency and the hard kind of the graft of just the yeah, the work has
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
done ahead. You have
Yep.
to there's no shortcut, right? I've come to accept that. There's all the stuff that the times that we did struggle or that we did have to work extremely hard on something very specific, that stuff gets absorbed into your cells,
Oh, yeah. And
and then eventually you can be intuitive, you
what
can
what
let
what I enjoy
go.
about all of it is the learning never seems to stop.
Yeah.
Every
Mhm.
every book, every session like this, I have notes I take on these. I mean, so far you've said nothing noteworthy, but if you did, I'd write it down. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I haven't heard any, yeah, scritching of any
No,
writing over there. I'm really
got it
wondering
right
what's
here,
going on.
pal.
Mhm,
Hey, we have a couple
okay.
questions here that are
Okay.
really good. One of them goes back to something that we said earlier, and this is the tough part. So if you're in the booth all by yourself and there's no audience, then of course you do have the little thing. Did that come across as funny? Will someone else think it's funny later? That's with
Mhm,
no immediate feedback.
mhm.
Um, if I tell a joke around my house, I immediately know that needs to be sent back to the writers
Mhm.
because nobody laughed. And I had one last night where I was playing pickleball with some guys and I said something and then they looked at me and I had to explain the joke. So I really knew it was
Oh,
funny when I got to explain why that should have been funny.
I love it. Right,
I had
exactly.
immediate feedback that shut up would have been the right
the
for that
Oh,
case.
yeah.
Now,
Oh, yeah.
my answer to Sherry is yes, it's still funny. If it's funny, it's funny.
Mhm.
Funny is funny, and how you
And
tell it. But
and we
Don, when you said that, I don't know if you know, Scott Brick and Sean Pratt and I were in LA. We started this, oh my god, it was years ago. We're driving around, and we started as fellas will do, telling, rude jokes, um, not all of which are
Oh.
funny, but one of them, and somebody told I can't do it now because I don't wanna offend anyone, but I said, "It's funny because," and then I broke it down like conjugating a sentence. I broke it down, really, which really destroys the joke. And so now, whenever we're together, we always somebody says something funny, we always then whoever can get there first tries
Ye
to tries to tell us why it's funny to ruin the moment.
yeah,
exactly,
It's
'cause
not funnier than the jokes anymore.
right, conjugating verbs and stuff that really
yeah,
that's great material, you
Yeah.
know? I joke with my wife a lot that, sh I would get really enthusiastic about well, I'm a huge nerd about so many subjects, but I'll get to talking a joke between us is that I'm gonna start talking about Russian grammar to her.
Oh, yeah,
And
good
she
stuff.
says, "Oh, yeah, if I need to go to sleep and I cannot go to sleep, just start talking about Russian grammar." Like, and she's had to stop me so many times to be like, "Honey, honey, I love you so
I
much.
love you, but
You
I
gotta
don't.
stop. You gotta stop talking about the animate accusative. You gotta stop. I don't care, and I can't retain it, and I'm getting anxious, you know?"
Yeah.
So, I guess, to each their own and all that.
Speaking of
But,
Russian, what did you call it? What's the second word? Russian something?
oh, the animate accusative. Oh,
Oh,
boy.
yeah, yeah,
See,
yeah.
I'm
Well,
gonna put
that's
you all asleep. You're all gonna be asleep in a few minutes, and I blame
that's
Johnny.
been but that's been a big part of my life. So
What yeah. What did Chris Walsh
yeah,
ask?
that's
What's
the
the
one I wanted to get to here. So when narrating a chapter with multiple male and female voices and accents, do you, Keith, record the narrator's track first and then add each voice separately, or do you read through all at once and just go between all the different voices?
I suppose I could see it being possible for somebody to do it by recording dialogue for characters on different tracks and so on, but no, I think the way you gotta do it, I think, in order to be efficient, and actually I've come to believe to truly do the best job of telling the story is you have to be in it, and you learn to modulate your voice and leap between all of the characters in real time, and I think, boy, you wanna talk about a performer's high. I mean, I think this is some of the most surely the most engaging work I've ever done as an actor is this, because the challenges are so great, and part of that challenge is like, man, when you get to the high of, I know all these characters, the scene is just locked in my head, it's unfolding, you guys talk about cinematically a lot, and I really believe that. I think I'm a very, yeah, like a visual learner in that way, and when that scene is playing in your head and you're leaping between characters, it just is such an incredible feeling, and you have a sense of when you're really in the pocket with it, when you really know who everyone is on a really deep level. And I think that that's what you're striving for, yeah, in narrating is to really flow between all of the different characters, and it takes time to learn how to do that and how you do it, your approach to character voices and things like that. But I think, yeah, I feel like, I mean, I suspect I'm preaching to the choir for those listening, for many of us, but yeah, I think you just gotta go straight through and play everyone in the moment, to be true to
Yeah,
it.
I'm hesitant to say anyone that, "Hey, if you do it." I do exactly what you do, Keith. I play it in the it's a linear scene. I just play it. I see the scene, we do act the scene. I suppose some people may. I don't know anyone who does it this way, and I don't know any, publishing houses that direct you to do it this way. If you're doing a multicast thing and Keith is just playing Don, and so Keith's gonna read all Don's lines, and I'm
Mhm.
reading all Keith's lines, well,
Here's
that's
my
different. Somebody plugs that in.
got
Um,
my
but
clicker right here.
no, yeah, so but if you're doing the straight narration, I've never seen anyone break it down, do this, and then add a line, add a line, add a line. And I don't wanna say, "Hey, don't do." I'm not, it's not my way or the highway, but I think that's a mistake, and I think you will find it more helpful for the story, for your engagement, for listener engagement, just to play it through. If it's hard, that's fine.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
okay. This if it was easy, everybody would do this.
Mhm.
And
Our job, much like Don's career as a drummer, that's something everybody thinks they can do.
right,
If you think about what instrument you could play, well, the drums. It
everybody can play
sticks
it.
and bam, bam, bam. You don't realize that's not an easy gig. Not everybody can do it. And certainly reading a book out loud, well, shit, anybody can do that. They can't.
Well,
Mhm.
So,
everybody
yeah,
can do it at some level. The difference
yeah,
between a pro yeah, but the difference between a pro narrator and somebody reading the book, like for their kid, it's just the level of acting to do it at a high level is totally
yeah,
different than me reading a book to my kid as a non-actor. So
Yes.
there's just a huge gap between those that the newer person doesn't always realize. Uh, if you piece
Mhm.
them together, maybe character B versus character A, so will be better within themselves short term, but long term, every significant performer that I know that does this is recording the whole thing linear. Wow, how do you one after
R
another? Say
Linearly,
linearly.
Literally.
linearly.
I'm a practicer. That's gotta go to my new tongue twister list. Linear li
Mhm, mhm.
I'm
yeah.
bad at particularly at
Yeah,
this
Oh
time.
boy, that's rough. Yeah.
so,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Oh,
that's the same thing as a musician that what you end up doing is you play a country tune. My instructor would always say, "Hey, if you go out and get a country gig," which I was not, I didn't even as a young guy, I didn't like that music, but today I like different aspects of all sorts of different things, but I didn't like a certain type of music. He was like, "Well, shut the F up." He didn't say it
mhm,
that way. You go out and play that, and you want everybody in the audience, but also your other band members to think that's the only thing you do. If you get a country gig, you play country, which would be the same in this world as you play Southern and you don't like Southern people for whatever was ever wrong with you.
mm.
You still have to play that character to the max, and no one else should know that you don't love it. So,
Uh,
Yep.
1 yeah, 1,000,000%, and, you know, what this makes me think of is the fact that, well, for I didn't mention this before, but, you know, my for those that know, like I said, most of my work is under a pseudonym. My very first job, I had to answer the question of whether I was gonna get a pseudo because it was, you know, the very first job I got out of my studio was, a great work with an author I still work with. I'm literally working with today, like, I'm recording stuff today for the same author. We've done 30 30-ish books, 30-something books together, and it was a paranormal romance. It's actually kind of a one of those, like, kind of millionaire, billionaire romances, and it was terrific. It was a new series, and I was like, "Oh, crap, I guess I have to get a pseudonym now," and, so I had to answer that question for myself very
Well, why
quickly,
did you feel
but
like you needed let's talk about this. Why did you
yeah.
feel you didn't wanna be Keith Brown on this?
Well, this was my hand was sort of forced in my approach to this because at the time, I was still very c I had some connections and friends and stuff in the, like, world of classical music, which is a very the donor base for classical music is still it's very conservative. It skews much older as you can imagine. It's, I was connected with a lot of these folks, and I started to think, you know, I think I need to maintain some kind of professional separation here because if, you know, someone Googles me under my name and they end up with, lots and lots of, people wearing very, very little, and lots of, you know, naked werewolves, as my wife and I call it, naked werewolves. If they find my naked werewolves, then they, you know, maybe that'll cause trouble for a company that has asked me to, you know, to represent them or something like that. And and then it was even more important when my wife started teaching here at the Interlochen Center
Oh,
for the
right,
Arts.
your husband I
And
just
I was
read
like,
your husband's new book.
I used to almost I mean, I used to have these, like, panic dreams where I'd be like, you know, like, one of her students' parents had found my pseudonym,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then, you know, I was like, "Oh my god," and the students, these are high school students. I was like, "Oh my god." So, for me, it just made sense right away, and, uh, and I just kinda leaned into it. If I'll be completely honest about it, I think what made me think of this was the idea of playing characters. You have to commit 1,000% to any
Yeah.
character that you're playing, and I know Paul Rubin, you know, would say, and you will say too, that, you know, nobody knows they're in a bad book. There's no such thing as a bad book. There's no such thing as badly written anger. It's just anger, or what, you
Yeah.
know, it is the same thing. So
Yeah.
I knew that, and actually I was afraid that I wouldn't be taken seriously for because I mean, I came in with, preconceived notions about, like, romance and erotica, and I was afraid, honestly, that publishers hated money, and I thought
I
maybe
hope you've changed your mind about that. That's
I
all I
know.
care about, yeah.
Maybe they won't hire me or something, and it was so silly once I actually thought about it and look and did more research. So, anyway, I ended up deciding, this is part of the conversation of, you know, do you specialize in some things or do you
Yeah.
just say, "I do everything"? And I leaned into romance
Yeah.
very early because, I had a conversation with, actually another, golden voice narrator, actually, not you, Johnny, no, but I
I'm
had a
not the only
conversation.
one, I promise.
Right, I know you're not. I had a conversation with and it was really, really illuminating and helped me clarify that, you know, there's a need for people like me in the romance space.
Oh,
As it happens, that was just a good fit for me, and it was sort of eye-opening to be like, "Wait, I thought I love doing romance, but I thought, like, I wouldn't be as marketable or something, or I thought maybe everybody can do it. Every man is good at it, you
You
know?
know what? People there's a lot of pseudonyms, and
Mhm,
they're fine to use, absolutely fine, and publishers don't mind it either, because the work that Keith Brown is known for example, when I started, which was, like, 91, so way before you, and I did a lot of kid stuff. I did all the Horrible Harry books, there's tons of them,
mhm.
and people would just get a Johnny Heller book for their kids, not realizing, and then I started doing, a lot of, adult not adult, but adult material, and then I g the very first, I guess erotica book I did was something called Full Service by Scotty, Bowers. I don't even
I
know the
see what
story.
they did there.
Huh?
I see what they did there.
They did a Netflix thing on it. It's allegedly true story about this guy comes home from World War II, goes to LA, and, ends up working at a gas station once and ends up being a pimp for all the Hollywood celebrities, hooking 'em up with men, women, whatever, and according to him in his book, every famous person you've ever heard of he either railed him or they railed him. It's just
Mhm,
everybody it's just more and more crazy, bizarre, strange, sex, and most of the people we talk about doing or being done to were already dead. So they couldn't say anything, and some of the stories were, like, outrageous, and it said, narrated by Johnny Heller. I'm thinking, what happens to the family traveling down to, Florida, puts a Johnny Heller book in to entertain the kids, and it's all this stuff. So I can see and I have a pseudonym,
mhm.
for stuff, but, now that erotica and romance is such a giant genre, I can understand, and there's absolutely nothing wrong for you kids out there listening. Go ahead and use a pseudonym if you want, or don't if you don't want. I promise you the publishers don't mind either way, they just want a damn good book.
Mhm. And they want you to solve a problem for them or serve their needs. I think that,
Yeah.
that was a thing that was transformative to me. Oh, and it was also my first, gosh, because I had committed to romance and marketed myself that way, in addition to my language skills and stuff like that, that's
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of my secondary specialty. But, uh, just leaning into that, I mean, that helped lead me directly to publisher work. I love Eric Black, and I got to know him through New England. We made the personal connection. In this case, I got very lucky 'cause many publishers, you play the game for 2 years, 3 years before they call you back or whatever. But for just he had a need, he remembered who I was, he saw me work with Johnny, and within weeks, I was booking stuff with them because there was a need for it, and it gets me in the door with places, and if I can say, "Here's how to cast me, I've done tons of this, I
Yeah.
seem to fit right into this particular mold, and hey, I do other stuff too," but it helps them think of you right away,
Yeah.
and, yeah, so it's like just serving a need. I didn't know when I started out that there are very few male narrators who are good at romance, who love it, who think it's,
Yeah.
really fun and important,
Yeah.
and so they respect the work and they're good to work with. I pride myself on being a good colleague,
See, I think
you
that's
know
great.
yeah, and realizing, how can you serve what makes you stand out, is so crucial, especially with so many folks who do this and want to do this. I think just owning who you are and all the special things that you know that others don't is huge.
Well, I think you bring something up that'll segue nicely into Chris Walsh's comment. The idea of it's the narrator's job in our industry to um, solve problems for the publisher.
Hmm,
And
hmm,
I've always said that you have to answer questions, solve problems. You can't be part of the problem. And your attitude, frankly, is refreshing and decent, and it's the right attitude.
hmm,
Um, I don't do a lot of, I mean, I do almost every genre, but very little. I don't do erotica very much,
mhm.
but mostly because I sound like this. I don't think people want to hear me sound that talk dirty. Um, but also, I'm
No,
not
no.
comfortable. I'm not comfortable with it. I'm just not. I know I'm
Yeah.
not. So
Mhm,
therefore, I don't do it. But I don't judge those who do it because it's a giant part of the industry, and
mhm,
people love listening to it. They love it, and even though some of the stories, I'm like, "What are you crazy?" And I've read some like it
mhm.
boggles my mind, but if people like it, that's what we're there to serve, and when you say you're solving a problem for a publisher, Mr. Brown, that's exactly what the job is,
Sure, sure.
which brings us to Chris Walsh's
Yeah, question for the
Mhm.
panel. Let's say you're the rights holder. What criteria would you use to choose a narrator, and how would you rank those criteria, including price, in order of preference? That's a
Mhm.
multi-part question.
Yeah, it is.
First, let's say, what criteria would you use to choose a narrator?
Mhm.
Clearly, the first thing to look at is age. They must be over 60, right, Johnny?
Yeah, I
Hey.
wouldn't know about that.
Okay,
Um, I think here's what I think. I think, and there's any number of factors go into this. Are they an engaging storyteller? Which I think covers the base. Are they a good actor, et cetera, et cetera? One of the problems in casting these days, I believe, is authors, right, souls have a great deal of power, and they wanna hear the voice that's in their head.
right,
Mm. Mhm.
Keith
right.
Brown is a great actor. John Heller's a great actor. Don Baarns is an actor. So, but let's say here, but
Humor.
Don's voice is the one that the author hears in his head.
Correct.
So Keith Brown, the best actor's not getting it because he didn't sound like Don. Johnny
Yeah,
might get closer to Don, but no, I think I'll use Don, who may not be the best at
yeah,
all,
yeah, yeah.
but that's the sound, and I think that becomes a problem, and there's nothing, 0, nothing an actor can do about that. And
Mm.
one of the important things, I don't know if Chris meant this or not, or anybody means this, look, your job as an actor is A, to audition and do the best audition you can, the best job you can give, and then forget about it. And if you get it, great. If you don't get it, move on. You cannot, Keith Brown cannot be responsible for what Johnny Heller hears in his head when he wrote the character.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
that I think is the least important factor in casting, but it's the most important from an author's perspective.
I do think
Mm.
if Keith sounds like the author's ex, who
Yeah,
they never wanna hear from again,
that's going
Mhm.
to kill him.
it doesn't matter that he was actually the best actor overall for the audience.
Yeah, yeah,
If that rights holder gets to choose, then they're gonna go, "I don't want Barnes. He sounds like my ex. I hate
yeah,
that guy." Alright,
Yeah.
there's nothing I'm gonna do to get
yeah.
that. So, yeah,
Well,
that,
what do you think, Keith? What are the important things you think? What are the
Well,
criteria you use?
well, yeah, this is a big question and a very good one, and yeah,
Yeah,
I appreciate thank you for taking the beginning of that there, 'cause I agree. I think it's gotta be about who's a great actor. You mentioned in here, price as well, Chris, and I think for my money, and I believe this to be true, whatever kind of professional you are, whatever business person you are, um, I I I think we need to just charge good rates, the proper rates, and to me, I if I'm gonna hire a photographer for my wedding, I I looked around and I knew kinda what the price ranges were, and to me, if I saw someone saying, I'll do this for one less than one quarter of that," I actually worry about that person. Like, I there is definitely a time and we all wanna save money, nobody wants to spend all their money, but if you know what the professionals are charging and kind of within a particular range, you make that work. So I think as a narrator, at least I know that you're asking to put ourselves into the rights holders stance, but I would think that I would consider price, but I don't see
yeah,
myself ever wanting I want the job done great. I want it done the best it can be done, and if I can afford that rate and it's a reasonable rate that's being asked of me, to pay, then it's all about I guess that's a long way of saying it's just about the who's gonna do the best job and be the best to work with, and if they happen to cost a little bit less, great, but I don't think to me, I think I would put that last, myself, 'cause I
yeah,
don't care, I just want it to be the best.
yeah,
yeah.
but I
And
think that's
if I
valid.
pay 20 finish or if I paid $20 per finished hour for it, and the person actually was the best in talent-wise, I think that would color my perception of that person a bit. I hate to say it, but I would, because I would think, "But I isn't this don't they have to have equipment?"
Yeah, why are you so cheap? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Anyway.
So, anything else that you use to select a narrator? So basically, it comes down to, can that person tell a compelling story and they sound authentic when doing
Yeah.
so? Close?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And, there's also those folks who audition really strongly but don't deliver, and vice
Sure.
versa. People
Sure.
who get nervous, but this is more true probably in stage, though. Um,
Hmm.
Gosh, I mean,
Well
I've written shows, and I've had people audition who were brilliant at the audition and horrible in the
mhm.
performance, and vice versa all the time.
I hear about this in, in the broader world of voiceover. There are problems about people that get demos done, right? They get demos done and they spend a lot of money.
And they can never
And
recreate it.
sure, and it's like I mean, honestly, if you had to get directed for 2 hours to get that one line a certain way, I wonder if you're gonna practically be able to do it. Because yeah, you have to be able to just turn it on when it's time to do it. When it's time to do the work, you gotta step on stage or, transport yourself and go, I think, and, yeah, but yeah, being able to yeah. Hey, Brenda. I love Brenda so
Happy
much.
birthday, Brenda.
Oh my god, happy birthday.
Ugh,
But yeah, she says auditioning is really different. Yeah, and I'm much better at it now than I used to be, I think, in terms of, finding that balance of where, okay, if I keep working on this, it's just gonna be diminishing returns.
right.
But at the same time, you gotta polish it up. That first 30 seconds, it's
Yeah.
gotta be really good.
And also there are things you like here, I guarantee Brendan and I will be equal. We both like, auditions where you just get the script before you go in and here you go, or improv your way through it. Yeah, she's good at that. I'm good. That's stuff we like. Of course I like that. Maybe Keith likes that.
Mhm,
Other times there are, do your prepared monologue for me. Now, I used to have prepared monologues in I don't have to go look them up again because I haven't done it in ages. But, you had theatrical a classic and a modern, whatever, funny, serious, all that stuff. And sometimes you rehearse them so much, they completely lost their spontaneity. And by the time you deliver it, the best of times was the worst of time. It was not a good time, and it's just that's just crap, So auditioning is a separate skill set.
yeah,
In
mhm,
in audiobooks, however, because generally we can't read the whole book, and that's something else. Here's 4 pages or here's a few paragraphs. Well, I may have the character completely wrong based on those paragraphs.
mhm,
Who's ever selecting the actor has to remember what I've been given, what Keith's been given to work with. Keith can't play everything if you haven't told him everything. He can only base it on what he sees there, and I said, "Oh my god, you finally got the job," but he's not in fact Jamaican. You don't know that until you get the whole book.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to have all the info.
Yeah.
Um, but
Uh,
I'm gonna give Brenda a huge shout out here real quick because she's a wonderful friend, very dear friend, and,
I love
sh
Wazlu.
she's amazing, and also she taught me, something really wonderful at the last New England retreat when she taught her improv class, and I did that thing where I was like, "Oh, I'm terrified to take this class. I'm terrified," which probably means I need to do it.
Yeah.
I was like, "I gotta lean into it because I know I'm gonna be, oh, I'm just gonna do it. Screw it." I trust Brenda. Well, she's a terrific teacher, excuse me, terrific teacher, and I came out of that class, I mean, I felt it was like I'd played 27 hours of pickleball straight, Don. I was sweating, but I was so happy that I had done it, and I still now, there's things that she taught me that I've taken forward, from that class where, when you are reading and prepping your manuscript, I find it a lot easier and quicker, to you make choices about the character and then you just commit to them. And improv is like, you commit to that choice and now you're just going to follow it ahead. And you've got the actor that you're trying to emulate in your head or whatever. And the book speaks to you and you just commit and go with it. And so, anyway, I'm very grateful to Brenda for that.
Yep. Well, but one of the things about both of you that many don't realize is how much prep work you've done over the years to get to the point where you can now be spontaneous, where you now can be engaging and be in the moment because of your prep work, and
Hmm.
that is cumulative. And then being able to walk in to do it in an audition is a skill. And most of us are not great at, many of us are not great at auditioning to begin with, but over time you become better at it. It is a skill and it's something that needs to be practiced. A lot of this stuff is practice with some, and I consider it guided practice. You get a good coach who has a different set
Hmm.
of ears and a different perspective, and
Yes.
man, they can push you forward so quickly. You walk in and do that class, I'll bet you're still today hearing little things going on and then applying those same principles from something you did in a class 2 years ago. Same as we
Hmm.
talked about earlier.
Hmm. It
A
needs time to
absolutely.
percolate.
Yes, it does need
Yeah.
time.
Well,
So,
this has been a wonderful chat with the lovely Keith. We're gonna have you back again, I think.
Oh
We like
gosh.
you.
Oh geez. I'm so grateful to both of you for all that you do for this. I mean, this community. Actually, I started watching these partly because, after my first New England retreat, I got such a good feeling, in my heart and whatever, and I had met so many amazing people. I wanted to keep riding that feeling, and
Yeah,
so it was sort of like, oh, that feeling of I know people now. I know people in this space now. Like these are my
yeah.
actual friends and colleagues. Many of them I've now worked with these people as my co-narrators and stuff, and so it was. Anyway, I'm very grateful to you for all of this because it's a treasure trove of information, and I learn something new every week.
Well, we're
Best.
thankful you feel that way. I'm doing it as a community service. Don, of course,
Yes.
as a result of judicial,
Yeah.
rulings.
It's
Yeah.
Of course. Of course, yes, we know. Yeah,
but
mhm.
another 3 years of community service, I'll be over
That's
that sentence,
There you
okay?
go.
So
He'll be back out there in the workforce.
get
yeah,
back out sweeping
I'll be back out sweeping the
sweeping the
streets,
highway.
okay?
Yeah,
So,
buddy.
yeah, so we're super
So
happy.
what's coming up, Keith? Anything coming up
Yeah,
you
what do
wanna
you wanna
promote
Oh,
do?
while you're here?
sure. Oh my gosh. I have actually, I'm very grateful for a lot of variety these days. I'm of course, I'm doing lots of romance, but then, I'm doing a lot of nonfiction these days, and I've been finding that to be really wonderful.
Yeah,
I've gotten to do books about omega-3 fatty acids and Muhammad Ali and the history of mixed martial arts, and next month I'm doing my first book for that's being published by Harvard Press, and it's a history, huge. It's going to be my longest book yet. I think probably about 20 hours, and it's a history of Smolensk, which is a region of the former Soviet Union where Stalin and Hitler's dictatorships overlapped in the Second World War. So it's a history of Smolensk, and it has a whole bunch of Russian and German in the book, which is probably why I got cast for it. And because those are a couple of my languages, and I love it. And I just made a Oh, and I have to thank Rebecca Lee, by the way, Rebecca, uh, who gave me some great advice about getting into lit RPG, at the last APA social, and I'm putting it to work, and
great.
by God, I am manifesting to get to do lit RPG this year because I don't know why I hadn't ever done any of this, but I just made myself a
That's great.
demo. I just made myself a demo for lit RPG specifically, and I'm excited to start slinging that around.
That's really
Good.
cool. Johnny? What do you have coming up, Johnny?
We've
Hey,
got
wait,
actually a
you have
couple.
something in February, don't you? Was that New York? Is that, what's going on in
Yes, yeah,
February?
Paul Allen Rubin and I, February 8th, that's a Saturday, we'll be doing a
Mm,
audiobook intensive, acting intensive here in New York City, probably at Open Jar Studios, maybe John Marshall Media, it depends. If we have a small number, we'll go to John Marshall because we can record it
mm,
and do it in the studio. If not, we'll go to Open Jar, it just depends. So, registration is open for that now on my site, johnnyheller.com. You get lunch, you get Paul Rubin, you get Johnny Heller, and you get a real chance to help up your game on a consistent level, based on acting, which is people forget that's what this is. So we try to
mhm.
remind you. That's happening. And then coming out on the 17th is my public domain book I did, Harpo Speaks. It's Harpo Marx's biography. I'm
Wow.
really
You
excited about
you
it.
hated you
And
hated doing that, didn't you? You
yeah, I
hated
do.
it.
Well, I can't wait till I do. I'm looking for Groucho stuff now, so we'll see it happen. That's my hero. I'll take his brother in the meantime. Yeah,
All
Don,
right.
what do you got?
Well, we're running late today, so I'll keep mine for next week. But we really appreciate you guys. First, both of you being here. That's always a joy. And all of we have a constant set of people that are showing up every week. Really appreciate you. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. It really helps the show if afterward you share it with people and you put comments even in the YouTube as opposed to
Oh
the
yeah.
comments that were here in the live show. So we're thankful you were here. We'll see you, of course, next week. I'm going to learn to speak by then. And as always, we look forward to seeing you on the wires. You have a great week. See you
Uh,
later.
Thanks
Hi
all.
all.
Love you all. Bye-bye. Yeah.